Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So, very important series of events. The Russians have been striking the southwestern coast of Ukraine now for essentially about 3 days. Port facilities, weapons depots, a command and control centers, a wide range of targets have been hit by the Russians in this area, running from Mykolaiv in the northeast to Odessa in the south. Now, let's go to the map where we can see the satellite image of what exactly we were talking about. So, obviously, Odessa, a tremendous amount of port facilities, as you can see here from the satellite image. These sites are in the process of being struck by Russian forces. In addition, infrastructure targets are being hit by Russian forces, as well as military targets and non-military targets related to military operations, such as the Kerch Strait Bridge. The Kerch Strait Bridge is a civilian target, but it does have multi-use capability in terms of the war effort, and that's why the Ukrainians struck it. And now the Ukrainians are paying the price for striking the Kerch Strait Bridge over in this area. So, as we continue to analyze and watch this conflict, I was watching a movie the other evening, and this movie, there's a scene in the movie that really, unfortunately, reminds me of a certain nation state. And in this movie, the movie is the new Mad Max movie, the most recent Mad Max movie. And in this movie, Max is used as a blood bag for one of these mutated humans that has captured him. And I don't know if anyone has seen this movie before, but essentially they use people that have a certain type of blood, obviously, and they hook them up directly to a member of their group, and they basically do a blood transfusion. And they called those individuals blood bags. So why do I think that Ukraine is perceived as a blood bag? Well, I'll try to explain. And I know it seems harsh, and it may seem uncomfortable, but we're going to have this discussion. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, is very much aware that the Ukrainians are not going to be able to achieve certain military objectives without an air force. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Can the Ukrainians retake certain areas? Can they have successful operations against the Russians? Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that. But the Ukrainians are talking about seizing, essentially retaking everything that you see here in this red or orange. That is their political and their military goal at this point. And the North Atlantic Treaty Organization continues to goad the Ukrainians on as if, I'll say certain elements of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, continue to goad the Ukrainians on as if they have the ability to retake these areas. Now, again, they may take some of these areas, but for the Ukrainians to have a successful military operation where the Ukrainians achieve an overall military victory with the current set of war goals, the Ukrainians are going to have an air force. They don't have an air force. The Russians do. The Russians have over 1,000 fixed-wing aircraft. That doesn't include combat attack helicopters, which are numbered in the hundreds. The Russians have hundreds of third and fourth generation Su-34s, Su-35s, Su-30s, older generation Su-27s, many of which have been upgraded. They have MiG-31s. They have Su-24s, older and upgraded, hundreds of those systems, hundreds of Su-25s. And again, if you put all these systems together, all these aircraft, you're looking at well over 1,000 aircraft. The Ukrainians probably have a dozen aircraft that are flyable. At best, 24 aircraft operating from remote air bases in western Ukraine. The Russians have the ability and have been doing so in terms of calling in direct air support. 30 to 100 sorties per day against Ukrainian targets. The Russians also have a lot more artillery and a lot more multiple launch rocket systems, and more importantly, they have an industrial base, an active industrial base that is producing additional aircraft, additional tanks. They have the ability to equip and train new soldiers, which they're doing en masse as they continue to expand their military, the Russians. The Ukrainians don't have that capability. They don't have, at least anymore, the same robust internal military-industrial complex. A lot of it has been destroyed by the Russians. The Russian military-industrial complex, the Ukrainians are unable to target. So if your enemy has an air force, has over 1,000 aircraft, if your enemy has a stable industrial complex also being supported by certain nation states from the outside, and the opposing nation state, Ukraine, does not have this capability, the long-term outcome is going to inherently be a defeat of the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have fought admirably. They have stymied the Russians. They have stifled the Russians. They have prevented the fall of Kiev. They fought very well. They had more tenacity and more will to fight than anybody thought going into this conflict. But that does not replace, that will to fight does not replace an air force. It doesn't replace a military-industrial complex. It doesn't replace the fact that the Russians are adapting and changing their doctrine to what's happening on the battlefield. But more importantly, again, it's the Air Force issue for the Ukrainians. The reports from the battlefield today, again, this map is not being updated. We believe that the Russians have made a breakthrough in the north, running from Lyman up towards Kupiansk at varying sectors in this area. And again, as we talked about before, because the Ukrainians don't have an air force, the offensive in the south, the Zaporizhzhia offensive, running from Orkiv, Zaporizhzhia, east of Volodar, has failed with 30% to 35% casualties. That's the facts on the ground. That's what's happening. So again, Thank you for joining us today. I truly appreciate everyone who jumped over on Patreon and supports the channel. Go to the About section, super thanks, Patreon, whatever you would like to do is perfectly okay. Again, thank you very much for the support. More to come very, very soon. And as always, have a good day.